Hi, this is Paula Gloria, and this show is called Farther Down the Rabbit Hole. Today I'm going to be doing a special show. I call it damage control. And the reason I'm going to call it damage control is because I want to follow up with what I started on the last show, which should be playing on Friday. And this is Monday, I'm hoping. And what I want to do is follow up about how we can communicate with the CIA. And what I showed on the last show was a CIA agent and how he pretends that he's an ex-agent and how he's working the hackers crowd and the people that come up to the microphone and the people that are probably planted in the audience in order to prevent us from really comprehending 9/11 truth. But the point about 9/11 truth is we in the media, the alternative media of course, who have studied the evidence and have shifted from the position that our government let something atrocious happen to the position that our government killed us, have a responsibility to ourselves to assimilate this in a constructive way. And then part of that assimilating it for ourselves is then being able to be effective in knowing what are the next steps once we have this knowledge in making it constructive to those around us. And again, if we're in alternative media, that's a lot of responsibility. So in the last show, what I felt, where I fell down on the job, was illustrated by one of the men who got up to the microphone, who I happen to know. His name is Steve. And he was talking about how we can approach this issue in a non-emotional way. And, you know, I said that I apologize for my own non-violent communication in putting labels on this and strong labels to try to illustrate my point. And that was that information was being withheld from the audience or misinformation was being given. But going a deeper level with nonviolent communication, I realized in being able to connect with the man who's pretending to be an ex-CIA agent, I'm masking my own fear. And my fear comes from the fact that if I don't have the adequate knowledge, I won't be able to live effectively with those around me. But in using my violent communication with labels, although that last show may relay a certain amount of perspective to you, it's not really going to where we need to go to create new realities. And in order to do that, we have to create connections of empathy. And the connections of empathy have to be done, of course, with the CIA. So that's why I'm saying this show is damage control, nonviolent communication, and the CIA. So what I want to do is play just a little bit of the past show for those of you that didn't see it. I'll make comments on it, and then we'll have some of Marshall Rosenberg. I think. So here's the past show.
Any questions? And this is completely improv. I'd like to get to bed by 1, but I'll do whatever you want me to do. And yes, sir, over there on the microphone.
Lights!
What?
Lights!
Lights! Camera! Action! I'm short, fat, and bald. I don't think I'm a movie star.
Alright, so I'm sure that if I look on Amazon.com, you probably have a review on it already. But have you read the Pentagon Snowman?
So here we're going to start, and what the purpose again of all of the work I'm doing here is to try to encourage people that we need not be fearful, we need not be secretive, and we need not be silent.
And do you think they're implementing some of the ideas in that book?
I have read the Pentagon Snowman. That book should have remained an article.
Yeah, it is.
That is a well-meaning young man who has never read anything by anybody else, had some good ideas of his own. He has been overly influenced by Wall Street. I would place that book in about the 3rd rank. Mostly what he talks about in that book is how fucked up the Pentagon process is, which is why I give it an extra star. Okay. It's not a serious book. I'm sorry.
Okay, thanks.
The 9/11 Truth Movement has several schools. One is the Keene-Hamilton Commission. That's the official conspiracy theory. And that's a conspiracy theory that the first school accepts. The second one is the official conspiracy theory.
I think you recognize me here. I'm up at the microphone explaining the different conspiracy theories, starting with the Keene-Hamilton-Zelikow one, which is the most outrageous. I'm going through it carefully with him, but I'm scared.
And I think that's what you're alluding to, that we're stupid, we're incompetent. But sir, the one that's the most extreme...
I'm not a sir, I'm a Robert.
Okay, Robert. Robert, the one that at first seems to be the most extreme, but upon investigation it's the one that's the least of all the conspiracy theories. It's the one that's the least outrageous. And that's the one I told you before that you were referring to, if you were leading up to this, that we're incompetent. Let it happen. Lie hop. Really is superseded upon those who really care about this tragedy, not only for the heartbreak within New York, but even in this moment what's happening with Israel and Lebanon, is my hop. Made it happen on purpose. That there's no laptop computer in a cave in Afghanistan and 18 people who may hate us like crazy but simply do not have the ability with box cutters to bring down a building.
Where are you going with this?
I want to know which school.
Did you hear that? 9/11 conspiracy theory. That's someone in the audience, you know, yelling that out. Would a hacker be doing that? The hackers are people who try to figure out how computers work. And, you know, the bright side of them, because this conference is called HOPE, Hackers on Planet Earth. Now, is that something that would be, you know, using violent labels? Although I have to admit, throughout this show, I also use labels.
I want to know which school of thought you're in.
Grade school.
Excuse me?
That's fine. Okay, stop right there.
Grade school, somebody said in the back, and he said, okay, stop right there. So, you know, you've got different people that will be shouting out in the audience. I hate to think that some people might be shy to shout out. Obviously, if you say conspiracy theory, you're not worried about anybody marking you in some big book. But I'm talking about rabbits for 9/11 truth, because rabbits are little animals, they're not herd animals, and they reproduce very quickly.
There are several converging themes in my judgment. Converging theme number one is that the U.S. intelligence community has consistently, over the last 50 years, and certainly over the last 18 years, when I first started this dogfight, and 18 years ago I discovered that 80 to 90% of what we needed to know about the real world was not secret, not in English, not online, and not known to anybody in Washington, including the menopausal grandmothers in the Foreign Broadcasting Information Service. And I use that insult deliberately. Unfortunately, they're married.
Did you catch that? The menopausal grandmothers.
Young white boys in button-down collars that don't know fuck all about the world. Okay? So theme number one is we've shut out 80% of the information that we needed to know in order to understand the extremist Wahhabism thing that was being pushed out. Theme number two is that the Central Intelligence Agency has been politicized for all too long, to the point that they have been forbidden to talk to opposition groups in Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Iran, and elsewhere. Okay? So CIA is basically a castrated service that is limited to talking to foreign liaison, which hands them what they want them to know. All right?
So don't go to sleep, because it gets, see what's really going on here.
There's a third theme here. And I've read most of the books. In fact, I have a list on Amazon on books indicting Dick Cheney for 9/11. Dick Cheney was in charge of an exercise on 9/11. He was in charge of the entire U.S. government.
So at this point, he's blaming Dick Cheney, and he's going on, and it tends to get boring, and that makes you sort of shut off, even though the topic is very provocative.
He wanted to let 9/11 happen. There is a strong body of literature that says that Dick Cheney very deliberately allowed George Bush to make an ass of himself by reading the book upside down.
I can't tell you how much is in this. You know, even as I was editing it, I saw things that I didn't see at that time. So I am going to post this on my website, and you can study it more.
Because they are using the politics of fear to steal us blind.
But you didn't answer my question.
All right, what's your question? In one sentence.
Line up, let it happen still presupposes that people who've been discovered, they're not 19 hijackers. Half of them have been discovered. And any of them, even if they wanted to, they simply couldn't have.
I'm sorry.
I'm saying you're either lie hop or my hop, and lie hop is very destructive.
Can someone explain this question to me?
Let it happen on purpose. You're telling me, made it happen. Made it happen.
See, I'm wondering, who's telling me here to sit down? And next question, although I have to admit I'm finding my sea legs, as I said. I'm, you know, I've only been introduced to 9/11 truth less than half a year, and it takes a while to assimilate and understand. So, you know, I wasn't perfect. There's a guy that's going to be coming after me, Nico Haupt, who's excellent.
All right, next question.
I just asked for some humility because
All right, next question.
wouldn't be.
Thank you.
You see how hard it is to get a dialogue going. But this is my responsibility. I take responsibility for it, and that's why I'm talking about the damage control that I want done here. So let's carry on. Now watch this.
Good evening.
Are you going to do a striptease? I'll go first. God, she's gorgeous. All right.
Well, thank you.
Good evening.
In any event, you were discussing the technological advancements going on within the CIA and what have you.
No, there are no technological advancements going on.
Okay, let me start over then again. The former CIA directors did focus less on raw or human intelligence for a time, ground intel, and they focused more on technological advancements, satellites, what have you. Now, one can certainly see with Mahmoud Ahmadinejad and Iran what's going on there because there isn't much raw or human intelligence. My question for you is this. How would you address this issue that because during a certain point the CIA did focus on that and now we're missing people in the field for human intelligence, raw like that, how would you address that issue?
I actually have a press release on this topic. If you go to my website, you will see a table of contents from my website. I realized I have 30,000 pages on my website, and it didn't occur to me until this year after I had a very bad experience with Wikipedia that nobody is fucking reading below level 1. So I've created a sortable table of contents, and in there you'll find a press release called Revitalizing the Clandestine Service. Here's what it boils down to. In the 1950s and 60s, we had a clandestine service that looked like the United Nations. You would walk into the CIA, and then we used to separate the analysts who we didn't trust. I mean, when I was a case officer and I was taken up to see the analysts in the 1980s, my chief of station said, don't tell them a fucking thing. Okay? This is how CIA works. Today, the entire intelligence community has been completely destroyed by Negroponte and this 1,000-person bullshit promotion above the Peter Principle. There is a very simple answer to clandestine intelligence, which is white boys don't know shit. You have to have multilateral, multinational stations in which the Americans provide the money and the processing technology and the management, and indigenous allies provide the street officers. Now the problem is that CIA is married to this concept of headquarters to headquarters liaison, which is basically code for headquarters assholes lying to headquarters assholes who don't know any difference. Okay? The DEA model is much better. The Drug Enforcement Administration takes officers from the individual countries and it puts them off on the side, and they bond as a band of brothers, and they do good shit together. And they keep their headquarters ignorant. This is the way to do it. All right? So if I were, and I've written several books on this. I mean, my first book on intelligence, spies, and secrecy in an open world has a chapter with 14 specific recommendations, which you can find for free on my website. If you just flip through, you know, refresh until you see the free chapter. This is real simple. We need a national collection agency that can actually get out on the street and get down and dirty. And Raul Goresh just said very clearly, we don't do diarrhea. Okay? It's easy to penetrate the Taliban. All you do is you take an 18 to 21-year-old, say, we'll give you $1 million in 10 years. Go fuck up your life for 10 years and come back when you've got contact. Okay? This is not a problem. But we don't have anybody in America that wants to go do that, except for this kid that Lyndon, whatever, that made it to Afghanistan, but he wasn't a CIA case officer or even an agent. He was just a dumb shit that wanted to go kill people.
So now what I want to do is move over to Marshall Rosenberg, because the point of what I'm doing with this show is not to really be critiquing whether or not the Central Intelligence Agency is keeping information from us, but I'm trying to see if I can overcome my fear, my trepidation, trying to make myself more responsible as an alternative media person, to see if we can create connections of empathy, and that is between all of us. So this man, Robert Steele, he didn't want to be called Sir Robert, is somebody who I would like to have an opportunity with in the future to say, why do you think, other than the fact that you have to pay your rent and that this is the only job around, or even if you stay in the CIA, because I think it is important to get intelligence and know about what's going on, but why do you think that we, the American people, are not qualified to really understand what's happening? Because really, knowledge is really, it's about, the more knowledge you have, people say, oh, knowledge is dangerous. If you know too much, it's dangerous. But I believe the opposite. I believe that different viewpoints that might be completely opposite to yours, will have different strategies to achieve something that we're all trying to achieve, no matter what we are in this life drama. And that is, both Robert Steele and I, the ex-CIA guy, supposedly ex-CIA guy, and me, you know, a little public access TV producer who is unprofessional. It's not my profession. I don't get paid for it. That, I guess, is what makes something your profession. What we both have in common is we're both human beings, and we both have to face the deepest fear that all men fear, and women, and that is the fear of death. And so what that means is that both Robert and I have to deal with the 5 elements, and how it is that our consciousness, our souls, our spirit, whatever terminology you might want to use, sort of teams up with the physicality, the earth, air, fire, water, produces a body, and we position ourselves in different ways in order to gather information and experience and bring it back to the soul. So from that point of view, that's the higher ground that I want to take this. So let's carry on with Marshall Rosenberg. It's in the potentials of human consciousness. Maybe we can say the unlimitedness. Today we have a really special guest, Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, who's the founder of a process called nonviolent communication. And I think as we talk to Marshall Rosenberg, we'll hear that indeed what we thought was limited in human ability to communicate, to share, and to understand is, I feel, with his method, really unlimited. This is part of an interview that I did with Marshall Rosenberg about nonviolent communication in corporations. And I have about 1/3 of it up on YouTube. And again, this is hard to put all these topics together in 28 minutes, but at least you get a taste of how we can accomplish new realities. So thank you, Marshall, for joining us.
I'm very glad to.
How did you develop this process of nonviolent communication?
Well, I started it by some questions that have been in me, deep in me, since I've been very young. My family moved to Detroit, Michigan, just in time for the race riots of 1943. 30-some people were killed in our neighborhood in 4 days. We were locked in the house during that time. And this was a powerful learning experience for me as a young boy, that this is a world in which people may want to harm you for no reason other than your skin color. Shortly after I went to school, I found out that not only my skin color could be a stimulus for violence, but my name could be a stimulus for violence. So that's really what got me started in this work, just that consciousness that this is a world where people can want to hurt others for such reasons. And that developed in me a deep interest as a boy. Why is this so? What happens to human beings that makes them so violent in regards to such things? And I was fortunate to see that, of course, not everybody is this way. I saw people who were just the opposite, very compassionate, very loving. So I had in my consciousness as a boy growing up to learn about this. Why do some people respond compassionately to others, and why are others so violent? So those questions got me started. I studied clinical psychology, hoping that this would give me some insights into this. But what I saw in clinical psychology was really a perpetuation of the violence, because it was based on looking at people who behave in ways we don't like as though there's something wrong with them, as though they're mentally ill. And at that time I was starting to see that this was part of the problem, this kind of labeling of people, this kind of dehumanization that comes through our language, in which we think in terms of wrongness. So I then started to study people who were really living in the way that I valued, to try to see what contributed to their being able to stay compassionate even in the face of violence around them.
Can you give examples of some of those people?
Well, in my book I mentioned one of them. I was very fortunate as a young boy to have an uncle who came to our house each evening. My grandmother was totally paralyzed and was on a bed in the dining room, and each evening he would come home from his hard work. He worked 8 hours, and then he would come over to our house and help my mother take care of my grandmother. And the whole time he was taking care of her, he had the most wonderful smile on his face. Well, whereas in the streets I was seeing the smile on the people's faces who were beating me because I was Jewish, and the observers watching it and enjoying it, I saw that kind of smile. And then I came into my house and I saw the smile on the face of my uncle as he was taking care of my grandmother. And of course I saw many such examples of people like my uncle, that no matter what's going on around them, they got more pleasure out of contributing to people's well-being than getting caught up in the violence.
Some people would say you create your reality, so in a certain way the fact that you were able to draw into your life more better examples than worse examples, it might have shaped your direction, because you're certainly not a wimp. You don't avoid conflict or helping people who are not the benevolent smilers, so to speak. You see the good in others.
I like your concept that we create our reality, but we got to, and I'm sure you're aware that this can often be heard in a way that implies we're blaming the victim for their conditions.
Oh, I agree with you.
So yes, to a large degree, how we look at things and how we behave creates our reality. But of course, we need to be conscious that to a large degree, gangs create our reality. Some gangs call themselves gangs. Some gangs call themselves multinational corporations. Some gangs call themselves governments. And these gangs create a lot of our reality.
But you're not afraid of these gangs. You use nonviolent communication to reach in and make your life more beautiful as a result of that reaching in.
Yes, one of the aspects of our training is not only to train people to be more compassionate to themselves and to be able to connect with others in a compassionate way, but to transform whatever structures are making it difficult to relate in a compassionate way, to transform the structures, the gangs as I'm calling them, to transform them so they support people contributing to one another's well-being rather than people competing with each other or dominating each other.
Well, many experts who've analyzed the whole multinational corporate structure, wind up giving data that's very discouraging. It's not like any one person's trying to hurt things, but like there's a momentum of the machinery that's set up that's not helping people get the most of what they can with the planetary resources.
If you see those structures and what power they have and how many people support them, it certainly can be scary. Even if you're as fortunate as I am to work in many countries with people who are banding together and getting things done in transforming these structures, it's very encouraging, especially in the last few years as more and more people become conscious of how these gangs function and what we can do when we get together to transform them. It's very encouraging.
So you help these groups of people to communicate better, and also, can you give an example of how they can communicate with the corporations using your methods?
Well, first of all, to get the access to the people who maintain the corporations is a very big step. So our training shows people how to use our training to get access to the people we need to communicate with. Almost all of us know someone who can get us in touch with the people we need to communicate with. So, but we need to communicate with these people. We need to communicate clearly what our life-serving vision is, that we intend no destruction of corporations or structures. We want to transform them so that they serve life rather than, whether wittingly or unwittingly, oppress people. So our training can be shown in how you get this access to people in power positions. Part of our training shows once you have this precious time that they give you, how to make the best use of it, how not to get enemy images in the way so that they...
So this was the point. I didn't want to have enemy images in the way, and that's why I wanted to do this follow-up show with Marshall Rosenberg's work, and I'm going to do a couple more because I want to keep going back and forth to the CIA guy, because I'm just so convinced that armed with this incredibly valuable knowledge of creating connections of empathy, we can get beyond all labels and all institutions. I'm Paula Gloria. Thanks for joining me.